Welcome back guys. Now in this video let's discuss about transport of gases. What are the two important gases which we need to transport? We need to transport oxygen from the lungs to the tissues, and we need to transport the carbon dioxide which is produced at the level of tissues. We need to get it back to the lungs, and from there we will perform the carbon dioxide outside the body. Now let's talk about how the oxygen is transported in the blood. The major transport of oxygen is in the form of oxyhemoglobin. Okay, so most of the oxygen, 97% of the oxygen is going to bound with the hemoglobin, and that will be delivered to the tissues. So majority of oxygen is transported in the form of oxyhemoglobin, but a little amount, only 3%, okay, a minor percentage, that is a 3% of oxygen is dissolved in the plasma. Now if oxygen is dissolved in the plasma, means that oxygen is the one responsible for the partial pressure of oxygen. If I say the partial pressure of oxygen in the arteries, the partial pressure of oxygen in the arteries is 100 mmHg. Okay, if I say this value, the partial pressure of oxygen in the tissues, so if I say the partial pressure of oxygen in the arteries 100 mmHg, what does I actually mean by? See, this partial pressure of oxygen is not because of the oxygen which is bound with the hemoglobin. See, this oxygen, the oxygen which is bound with the hemoglobin is not responsible for the partial pressure. The partial pressure of oxygen in the arteries is due to dissolved oxygen, this 3%. So the dissolved oxygen is responsible for the partial pressures. Okay. Now let's talk about the carbon dioxide. From where carbon dioxide is coming? Carbon dioxide is coming from the tissues. Now carbon dioxide is majorly produced in which form? Bicarbonate form. Okay, the carbon dioxide is majorly transported in which form? Sorry, not produced, transported. Okay, carbon dioxide is majorly transported in which form? Bicarbonates in the plasma. Okay, carbon dioxide will be converted into bicarbonates, and these bicarbonates are traveling in the plasma. Okay, they are traveling in the plasma. And 30% of the carbon dioxide will bound with the hemoglobin, that's a carboxyhemoglobin. So what is a major transport form of carbon dioxide? The major carbon dioxide, most of the carbon dioxide is transported in the form of bicarbonate ions in the plasma. Okay. Having said that, now let's discuss about some basic points. What are they? 1 gram of hemoglobin, okay, 1 gram of hemoglobin, it will carry how much amount of oxygen? 1 gram of hemoglobin can carry up to 1.34 ml of oxygen. Okay. Now, in healthy individuals, okay, in a healthy individual, if you take 1 deciliter or 100 ml of blood, in 100 ml of blood, how much hemoglobin will be there? Usually, if you check my hemoglobin levels, it will be somewhere around 13, 14 or 15. In a healthy individual, it will be 15. Okay, 13 to 15 males will have, a 70 kilo male will have 13 to 15 grams of hemoglobin. HB is 15, I will say. What does I mean by? If you take 100 ml of my blood, oxygenated blood, in this 100 ml of oxygenated blood, or in this 100 ml of blood, there is 15 grams of hemoglobin. Okay, 15 grams of hemoglobin is there in 100 ml. Deciliter mean 100 ml. So now let's calculate. Now 15 into 1.34. 15 into 1.34, it will be somewhere around 20 ml of oxygen. Okay, 20 ml of oxygen. So what I am trying to put into your mind is, every 100 ml of arterial blood, every 100 ml of oxygenated blood will carry how much amount of oxygen? 20 ml of oxygen. Okay, 20 ml of oxygen. Okay. Now having said that, now let's see how actually oxygen will be transported from the lungs to the tissues. Okay. Now please concentrate here. This is the alveolus. Okay, this is alveolus. Here I am showing you the circulation. This is the arterial side. Okay, this is the arterial side, or this is the oxygenated blood, which I am showing in the red color. Now on this opposite side, I am showing you the blood in blue color. This is the deoxygenated blood. Now oxygenated blood will carry the oxygen to the tissues. Deoxygenated blood will carry the carbon dioxide. First, let's talk about the oxygen transport, only about the oxygen transport. Okay. Now, see, the deoxygenated blood is brought to the alveolus via the pulmonary arteries. The pulmonary arteries carry the deoxygenated blood to the alveolus. Now see, in the deoxygenated blood, now hemoglobin is there or not? Hemoglobin is there. In oxygenated blood, deoxygenated blood, hemoglobin is there. Now look at this hemoglobin molecule. This hemoglobin molecule can carry, one hemoglobin molecule can carry 4 molecules of oxygen. But here only 3 molecules are there, which means one oxygen molecule is not there here. Having said that, now I can clearly say that this hemoglobin molecule is just 75% saturated. So in the venous blood or in the deoxygenated blood, hemoglobin is how much percent saturated? Hemoglobin is just 75% saturated. Now please look at here, I am taking the 100 ml of deoxygenated blood or 100 ml of venous blood. Now this 100 ml of venous blood, it have how much amount of hemoglobin? Same. Arterial blood, venous blood, hemoglobin is the same. Okay, 15 grams of hemoglobin is there. Okay. Now hemoglobin is, one hemoglobin molecule is how much percent saturated? 75% saturated, sir. Now if you look at the partial pressure of oxygen, so the partial pressure of oxygen is 40 mmHg. Okay, 40 mmHg. Okay, venous blood, right? It's just 40 mmHg. Now in the alveolus, see, what is the partial pressure of oxygen in the alveolus? PaO₂. It is 100 mmHg. Now see, deoxygenated blood is coming like this. It's coming like this. It's coming like this to the level of pulmonary capillaries. Now in the pulmonary capillaries here, this deoxygenated blood, what is the partial pressure of oxygen? The partial pressure of oxygen here is how much? It is 40 mmHg. 40 mmHg. 40. Okay, here it is PO2. Okay, it is 40 mmHg. Now here it is 100 mmHg. Now what will happen? Now gases will diffuse from high concentration to low concentration. Okay, now see, gases are coming, especially the oxygen. Right now here I am talking about the oxygen. Now oxygen is coming into the blood. In the blood, oxygen is getting dissolved first. Okay, now oxygen is getting dissolved. So what happened to the partial pressure here? Now here the partial pressure of oxygen, now it will become from 40, it will again come back to 100 mmHg. It will come to 100 mmHg. Okay, now what is happening? The partial pressure of oxygen is increasing because oxygen is now getting diffused from the alveolus into the pulmonary capillaries. Now first what happens, see, first what happens is the oxygen will dissolve in the plasma. When oxygen dissolves in the plasma, what happens? Partial pressure increases because dissolved oxygen is responsible for partial pressure. Now partial pressure becomes 100. Whenever partial pressure increases, see, whenever partial pressure increases, that partial pressure will cause hemoglobin to saturate. Or I can say, so at the level of lungs, more partial pressure of oxygen is there. Oxygen is getting dissolved into the plasma. Now even hemoglobin will take up the oxygen molecules. Your hemoglobin molecule, see, wherever the partial pressure of oxygen is more, there hemoglobin will love to bind with the oxygen. Now in the pulmonary capillaries, the oxygen is getting dissolved in the plasma, so partial pressure of oxygen increases. Whenever partial pressure of oxygen increases, there hemoglobin will take up the oxygen molecules. Now see, even this hemoglobin is taking up the oxygen molecule. Okay, it's taking up the oxygen molecule. So now hemoglobin is getting how much percent saturated? Now the hemoglobin is getting 100% saturated. Now look at the arterial blood. Okay, now look at the arterial blood. Now 100 ml of arterial blood, it have how much amount of hemoglobin? 15 gram of hemoglobin. What is the percentage saturation of the hemoglobin? 100% saturated. So what is the partial pressure of oxygen? 100 mmHg. Usually it will be somewhere around 95 mmHg, but for practical purposes, for understanding purposes, I am just keeping it as 100 mmHg. Usually it will be 95 mmHg. Okay. So now the partial pressure of oxygen in the arterial blood, 𝐴O2. Okay, 𝐴O2, it is somewhere around 100 mmHg. Okay. Now how much amount of oxygen is there? I have already discussed with you. 100 ml of oxygenated blood will carry how much amount of oxygen? 20 ml of oxygen. See, now this oxygenated blood is going to the level of tissues. With 20 ml of oxygen per 100 ml of blood. 100 ml carry 20 ml of oxygen. Now this blood is going to the tissues. Now what happens? In the tissues, what is the partial pressure of oxygen? At the level of tissues, the carbon dioxide is more, oxygen is less. So in the tissues, the partial pressure of oxygen in the tissues, okay, in the tissues, it is 40 mmHg. Now in the blood, what is the partial pressure of oxygen here? In the blood, the partial pressure of oxygen is 100. Now what will happen? Sir, from high partial pressure to low partial pressure. Now first the dissolved oxygen, remember guys, the dissolved oxygen, now it will enter into the tissues. Okay. Now what happens? Now as the oxygen is being moved into the tissues, as the oxygen is moving into the tissues, what happened to the partial pressure inside the blood vessel? The partial pressure will decrease. Now at the level of tissues, the partial pressure of oxygen is getting decreased. When partial pressure of oxygen, if it is getting decreased, means what happens? Hemoglobin will desaturate. Hemoglobin molecules, wherever there are high partial pressures, in those conditions or in those sites, it will love to bind with the oxygen. Now in the places where the partial pressure of oxygen is less, in those conditions, hemoglobin will leave the oxygen. So that's why see here as the partial pressure is going down, now it will leave the oxygen molecule. Now the oxygen is getting delivered to the tissues. Now the oxygen will be diffused into the tissues. Why? Because in the tissues less amount of partial pressure is there, so automatically oxygen molecule will be diffused. Okay. Now again hemoglobin becomes 75% saturated. Okay, oxygen is now getting delivered to the tissues. So now the blood is becoming venous blood. Now see, venous blood is forming. Now my question to you, how much oxygen have gone to the tissues? 20 ml of oxygen. Now in the venous blood, if you check, oxygen content will be 15 ml. Like oxygen content will be 15 ml. 15 ml of oxygen is present in 1 deciliter of venous blood. 20 ml of oxygen is present in 1 deciliter of arterial blood. Now what is the difference? 5 ml, sir. Where this 5 ml have gone? The 5 ml of oxygen. Every minute 5 ml of oxygen is delivered to the tissues by 100 ml of blood. Okay. Having said that, now let's see some basic points. Okay. Normally 100 ml of oxygenated blood. Okay, 100 ml of oxygenated blood will deliver how much oxygen to the tissues? 5 ml of oxygen to your body tissues. But we don't have just 100 ml of blood. We have, for example, let's say understand like this. If 1000 ml blood, okay, 1000 ml of oxygenated blood, how much it will deliver to the tissues? If 100 ml is going means 5 ml will be delivered to the tissues. If 1000 ml of arterial blood is going means how much will be delivered to the tissues? 50 will be delivered. 50 ml of oxygen will be delivered. But we don't have just 1 liter of blood. We don't have just 1000 ml of blood. We have 5000 ml of blood. 5000 ml means 5 liters. If 5 liters are going to the tissues means how much? 250 ml. 250 ml of oxygen is delivered to the tissue. So this is important. Now your 5 liters of blood every minute is going to the tissues. Now 5 liter of blood will deliver 250 ml of oxygen to all your body tissues every minute. So your tissues are requiring how much amount of oxygen every minute? 250 ml of oxygen is being delivered to the tissues every minute. Okay. Now important point is wherever the partial pressure is more, in that places hemoglobin will love to bind with the oxygen. Wherever the partial pressures are less, in those conditions hemoglobin will leave the oxygen molecule. At the level of lung, what is happening? Oxygen is now loading onto the hemoglobin molecule. At the level of tissues, oxygen is now getting unloaded. So these effects are called as Haldane's effect and Bohr's effect. Please look at here. What exactly is Bohr's effect? At the level of tissues, oxygen molecules are released from the hemoglobin. So release of oxygen molecules from the hemoglobin to the tissues is called as a Bohr's effect. What is Haldane's effect? Haldane's effect is the loading of oxygen onto hemoglobin molecule. Okay, loading of oxygen. Okay, loading of oxygen. This is O2. Okay, this is loading of oxygen to the hemoglobin, and at the same time unloading of the carbon dioxide. Later we will discuss in the carbon dioxide transport. Loading of oxygen to the hemoglobin leading to the release of carbon dioxide into the lungs. This effect is called as Haldane's effect. Okay, Haldane's effect happens at the level of lungs, Bohr's effect happens at the level of tissues. So in this video we have discussed about how oxygen is transported to the tissues. In the next video we will discuss about oxygen hemoglobin association dissociation curves. Hope the video is helpful. Thank you.